different impervious or pervious surfaces, like your driveways or your yards, and it holds all that water together. So this is from the Watershed Stewards Academy Rainscaping Manual. And this is an amazing source when you're trying to design your own rain garden. And I will give you a picture of what it looks like. It's online, so very easy to access. And I have links for it and everything. Okay. So benefits of a rain garden. Filters stormwater. It filters out pollutants. Recharges groundwater. I want to concentrate on that one real quick. As we have a lot of increasing impervious surfaces, and I'll go through the definition of that in the next slide, but we're having a strong overflow of groundwater, just a huge velocity, and we're not, of runoff, and we're not recharging that groundwater because water can't infiltrate through your roads. So what's nice about a rain garden is it gives a place for the water to go. Obviously, it helps reduce erosion. You got those plants that will help stabilize the soils, provides aesthetics, and it also provides habitats to a lot of your pollinators or small mammals. So does everyone know the difference between impervious and pervious? Okay. Okay, then I won't go through too much details of this slide, but I just sort of gave some examples because sometimes even I get a little mixed up and have to stop and think. Okay, so this is the general outline. We're going to talk about first where to start, how to even determine if a rain garden is going to be right for your property. Going to talk about location, where's a good spot to put your rain garden, design, so all the different aspects you need to put into the design and creating that rain garden, list of materials, including lots of plants, because that's why you guys are here. Construction, some construction tips, maintenance on how to make sure your rain garden stays functioning. That's always a big one. And then I'll end with our financial assistance program. So if you meet some of those requirements, we actually might have a funding program available to cover your costs. So these are the two resources I used a lot, just learning about rain gardens and for my presentation. The first one, I have a link on our website too. It's the Northern Virginia Homeowner's Guide to Rain Garden Design and Construction. And what's nice about this is it's directed to the Northern Virginia area. And I found it very, very good to read, like step-by-step, not too complicated. The Rainscaping Manual, also online. Next week, I'm going to try to add a link to that on our website so everyone can access it. It's also another really good resource. It goes into a lot more detail, but I definitely recommend if you're serious about a rain garden to check these two out. So some questions to ask yourself when you're deciding where do you want to start. And that's first, do you even want a rain garden? And of course, you guys wouldn't be here if you didn't. But you need to think sometimes you want a rain garden, but it may not be the right solution for whatever your current situation is. Conservation landscaping, for example, that's putting native plants where there's invasive plants or where you have bare soils. It's a much cheaper and cost-effective practice to put in. That might be better for you. But again, it all depends on what your situation is. Do you have a good spot to put a rain garden? So, and I'm going to go through this multiple times to reinforce this, but you always want to consider your property boundaries. You want to know where your utilities are located. You don't want a rain garden over a power line. And you also want to make sure your plants are not going to have competition to other plants that you want to keep on your property, like mature trees. And then finally, you need to, this is huge, you need to determine what is going into your rain garden. Water does not understand property boundaries. So you might have water from your neighbor's property going into your rain garden. So you need to kind of take that into your calculations when you're trying to size your garden. And when I say calculations, I will be going through that as well further in the presentation. So Here are the things that make it suitable, not suitable. Having decent drainage, you want to have decent drainage, or you're going to basically spend time and money to create a mosquito habitat, which is not what anyone wants. So if your water can't drain, that's probably not a good spot for a rain garden. Drainage to the rain garden. If you have a lot of water coming into that spot where you want to put it, and it's more than 10,000 square feet or a quarter of an acre, rain garden may not be the right solution. And when you're trying to determine how to size your rain garden, if your rain garden is going to be anywhere from 60 to 200 square feet, that's probably a good ideal solution. But if it's going to be huge, like you're getting 300 to 400 square feet, just to accommodate for all that water coming in, you might want to look at another solution. Probably one of the most important things to do before you even start determining where you want your rain garden and how you want to design it is you've got to do an infiltration test. And basically with this test, you dig a hole about a foot deep or so, you fill it up with water, you let it sit for an hour, let the water kind of infiltrate the soils, get those soils soaked, you fill it again. Then you check periodically to make sure that that water is going down. After 48 hours, as long as you don't have any recent rainfall, you shouldn't have water in that hole. And as long as you don't have water in the hole, then you have suitable soils. If the water does not drain, there are other options. You can either install an underdrain to kind of help keep that excess water out of your rain garden. Perhaps you have another location on your property that would be more suitable. Or there might be another best management practice that would be a better solution. And for other best management practices, you can contact me and I can help guide you on that. I'm not going to go into, since this is rain gardens, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there are other options. Right. So location, you want to try to look for something that is relatively flat, or at least less than a 5% slope. If you have a slope, you can still do a rain garden. You just have to make sure the berm is high enough so it holds the water in place. And I actually have a picture of one later on to show you what that looks like. Again, you want to avoid over utilities. If you have septic fields, try to avoid the septic fields. Under trees, again, you don't want the competition of nutrients and water from the plants that you already want on your property. And you want to try to stay away from buildings roughly 10 feet. And this is just to prevent flooding or seepage into your basement or the foundation of that building. So there's a lot of factors that go into designing your rain garden. So you want to know your inlets and outlets, where the water is coming from and where it's going to go. Again, you want to calculate the drainage that's going into your rain garden. So you want to get the square footage of the impervious surfaces. So the road, your driveway, the roof, and you want to get the square footage as well as from your vegetated surfaces. So lawns or garden. And remember that water does not know property lines. So you might have to take into account your neighbor's property is going to be washing into your garden. Shape of garden, circle and lima bean are the more common shapes. So just something to think about how you want to plan it. Dimensions of your rain garden. So this kind of goes along with dimensions, and that's the ponding depth. And the ponding depth is the distance from the top of the berm to the bottom of the rain garden. And this is a number you choose. So it can be anywhere from 6 to 12 inches. Or 6 to 12, yeah, 6 to 12 inches. If you have a more shallow, so if you go with a more shallow rain garden, you're going to need it'll need to be wider. While if you go with a deeper rain garden, so like 12 inches, it's going to be a little smaller. So the ponding depth will determine the shape of that rain garden. There's probably some pre-treatment things you're going to need to do for your garden just to prevent leaves and sedimentation from getting in. Permits are very, very, very unlikely, but I do have a slide just kind of letting you guys know if you're if you've got a lot of disturbed land, you might need erosion and sediment control permit.
Are you taking questions now? Or
I was going to take them at the end, and I forgot to mention that.
okay.
So inlets, you again got to know where your water's coming from. Is it coming from? A lot of times, rain gardens are going to come from your roof. Keep in mind, it's probably not your entire roof. It's probably just a section of that roof. Rain barrels, you can actually install a rain barrel and have the overflow go to your rain garden. Roads, driveways, and yards and lawns. So all those different sources. And then outlets, where's the water going to go if it overflows or can't, like we have a really big rain event. And you want to make sure it's not going to go like towards your neighbor's property and cause an erosion problem there. You want to make sure it goes to a good place. So I've mentioned the sizing worksheets a few times. This is just an example of one of the worksheets. This came from the rain garden design construction from Northern Virginia. And it goes through step by step. It's like you calculate how much of your impervious surface is, how much of your pervious, what your ponding depth is going to be, and it will tell you at the end how many square feet you would need for your rain garden. Also, I forgot to mention that I know there's a lot of information in my slides, so if anybody needs a copy of it, let me know, and I would be more than happy to send that to you. And then this is the one from the rainscaping manual. And this one is a lot. I haven't used this one. I used the Northern Virginia one when I was designing a rain garden. I haven't used this one yet. It goes into a lot more detail. So if anyone's designing a rain garden and you want to use both methods to kind of see what you get, please let me know, because I'd be curious what the differences are between the two. Shape. These are just some examples I got from the rainscaping manual of different shapes. Circle and lima bean tend to be more popular. I don't usually see the corner ones as much. Dimensions. So how wide is your rain garden going to be? And how deep is your garden going to be? And I really like this chart, which I also stole from the rainscaping manual, because it shows just how you create the berm and how deep you dig it. So in this example, it's I don't know why they did inches instead of feet, but it's 180 inches and about 9 inches deep. And I will be showing this graph again too to help you determine the slope of that rain garden. So pre-treatment. As I mentioned, you want to prevent leaves and debris from getting into your rain garden. So some of the things you can do is install gutter leaf screens that you can put on that prevents the leaves from getting into your gutter and getting into the downspout for your garden. Having a stone channel that leads from the gutter to your rain garden. Ideal because it helps, those stones will help prevent will catch that sediment and leaves before it gets into your garden. It's also good at slowing down the velocity of the water, especially if you have a high rain event. Having a vegetated grass buffer, or doesn't have to be grass, but just having a buffer around your rain garden about 5 feet or so, again, to help with any overflow and to stabilize your soils. Oh, is there another one? I think that was it. Yep, that was it. Okay. So permits. When you're trying to estimate your size of the rain garden, you need to take account how much land are you going to be disturbing in creating the garden. So in Virginia, if you're disturbing more than 2,500 square feet, you do need an erosion and sediment control permit. Now, as I mentioned, you don't want a rain garden that's more than 200 to 300 square feet. So the chances of you needing a permit is going to be very, very slim. You do have to keep in mind, it may not be the rain garden itself that's being disturbed. If you have equipment coming in or you're trying to create a channel, you might have more land that's being disturbed than your actual garden. Again, I really doubt it's going to get over this number, but I want to make sure everybody's informed, just so you're aware. Not to cop out, but when it comes to determining how to get erosion sediment control permit, the best thing to do is to Google erosion and sediment control permit in your county. Because every county has a different department and a different title on who would handle that. So like Prince William County's Department of Development Services. And you may need to install silt fence if you're doing a rain garden, or I don't have this on here, but the bamboo logs, not bamboo logs, I forget what they're called, coconut logs. And that might be something you want to do, especially if you're doing the rain garden by yourself, is just having these logs around your garden until everything is stabilized and complete. Materials. So you're going to want to have mulch about 2 to 3 inches or so deep. Try to avoid any dyed mulch or any mulch that has trash or debris in it that you wouldn't want in your garden. Cobblestones, so these are for your downspouts, your inlets, and your outlets. Again, just to kind of help with the flow, slow the velocity. Filter fabric. You don't want your stones, washing into the soil and getting away from you or washing downwards. So the filter fabric helps hold the stones in place. Compost. So if that infiltration test, you're a little unsure, okay, is this a good spot for a rain garden? Maybe you might need to amend the soils just a little bit and add some compost, mix it up and kind of help it, help the water be able to infiltrate through the soils quicker. So you might need some compost. Obviously plants. And then there's a variety of tools you'll need. Stakes, having 2 stakes and a rope. This will help make sure that you got the dimensions right, and it will help you calculate that slope of the rain garden. Meter stick for measuring purposes. Shovels. Best, if you can find friends, neighbors, family members to help you dig this rain garden, you definitely want to have multiple shovels. Gloves, and then finally spray paint. So the spray paint is really good when you're trying to highlight the dimensions of your garden, or if you're having a lot of people help you, it's good to kind of spray paint like circles where you want to put your plants so you can make sure everything's spread out right. So plant selection. What's nice about a rain garden is you can have a little bit of everything. There are 3 different zones of plants. Zone 1 is going to be the lowest portion of your rain garden. So you're going to want plants that do like standing water because that's going to happen. But when your rain garden is dry and empty, you want to make sure those plants can handle dry spells as well. Zone 2 is going to be the plants around the edge of your rain garden. So these are ones that should be able to tolerate some water, but they can handle the dry. And zone 3 is around the edge of the rain garden, but the plants are very similar to zone 2. And you want to try to use mature plants, not seeds. So this is an example of the different zones, just to kind of illustrate what they would look like from a top scale and from a side view. And you can see zone 1 is in the middle, and then you have zone 2 surrounding it, and then zone 3 on top. Okay, now we're finally getting into the fun part. You can see some pictures. So these are some examples of plants you could put at the bottom of your rain garden. You can have swamp milkweed, ironweed, turtlehead, and I apologize when I was doing my presentation, I didn't realize I was picking all purple flowers, but just gives you an idea. Dark green bulrush. It's actually good to have native grasses in your rain garden and not just herbaceous plants. And cinnamon fern. You might need something that you might want something that's a little bigger in the bottom of your rain garden. And spice bush. So zone 2, so these are going to be the plants around the edge of your garden. So some examples of that would be blazing star, beard tongue, black-eyed Susan, smooth oxeye, and broom sedge. Again, want to have some native grasses in there, and Indian grass. And then for zone 3, You could still use the same plants that you use for zone 2, but you might want to have some larger plants like arrowwood viburnum, red chokeberry, or high bush blueberry, which is also needed. So this is probably the easiest way to tell you where to find this link. NRCS has an amazing guide that basically tells you what plants are good for your area. It'll tell you when to plant them, when they'll bloom, what color the flowers will be, what kind of soils they like. It's just awesome. It's loaded with information. So I have a link to this resource on our website, which I have over there. It's pwswcd.org-ecap. And that's what it's called, the NRCS Virginia Plant Establishment Guide. And this is just, it's a little hard to see, but this is just an example of all the information that they provide you on their site. I mean, it's a long, long row. So when you're choosing your plants for your rain garden, these are some things you want to consider and why this guide can be a useful tool. Again, you want to consider your soil drainage conditions, right plant, right place. Flower color, if you're especially, you want to have some aesthetics to your rain garden. So unlike what I had in zone 1, you probably want some other colors besides purple. Get some purples, yellows, pinks, and that guide will tell you what it is. And then the other big thing is blooming period. So if all your flowers are going to bloom at the same time, it might look nice for that short period of time, and then when they're done blooming, you lose those aesthetics. But also your pollinators don't have food either. So when you have different blooming times, you're constantly providing food for your pollinators, and it looks pretty. Construction. Can't stress this enough. Know the location of your utilities. Before you start construction, you'd want to call 2 days ahead of time to Miss Utility, which is 811. That's how important it is. They have a short little phone number. I recommend even calling them in your planning process, because it's hard to know the location if you don't know where your utility lines are. But they'll come out and they'll spray where your lines are. What they will not determine is where, like, if you have cable lines or fiber optics or other lines under your house. So you need to, that you'll have to try to figure out on your own, unfortunately. Install any erosion sediment control practices. Dig basin. So when you're digging your basin, the slope that you tend to want to have is a 3-to-1 slope, which is basically 1 vertical drop for every 3 horizontal drops. So it makes a kind of a nice gentle slope. You want to spread any necessary compact compost mixes to your soil, just to kind of, if you need to amend your soil, just to kind of make sure that infiltration will continue. And then you want to, of course, the best part is installing your plants and the mulch. When you put your mulch down, you want to make sure it doesn't touch like the green part of the plants. The main goal of the mulch is to protect the roots of the plants, and also prevent weeds from coming into play. And you want to make sure, again, you have an overflow for your rain garden, so the water has a place to go when you have a huge event and the garden can't hold any more water. So I wanted to do just sort of a quick guide on how to calculate the slope of your garden. So your slope is going to be the height or depth, and you divide that by your length and multiply that by 100. So in this example, we have 9 inches is how deep this particular rain garden is, and then 180 inches is how long it is. So that is 0.05. You multiply it by 100, and that's a 5% slope. So that's a good slope to have for your garden. All right, and now some actual pictures. So this is a rain garden that we did for a homeowner in Manassas. You can see we kind of spray painted the perimeter of that rain garden. That's me. We have the upslope stake and the downslope stake already in, and we have a rope tied between the two stakes. And I'm just making sure that rope is level as we're constructing our rain garden to make sure we meet all the dimensions we got from our calculation. And then this is us digging that rain garden.
You're gonna put all of that soil on the far side of the down.
Yep, it's gonna be at the downslope because it's gonna create a berm to hold everything in place like a bowl. And that's what it looked like when it was done. And those are the plants. And you can see that's where the stones are kind of guiding the water from the gutter to that rain garden.
And that pipe doesn't need to be buried.
It doesn't have to be. That's another picture. Okay. So these are the plants that we did in this particular rain garden. Where you see it says bee balm or wild bergamot. It was just because the plant was so young, we couldn't determine what it was in the picture. But it's one of those two plants. And then to give you an idea what some of these plants look like, we have sensitive fern, Virginia spiderwort, red columbine, blazing star, dark green bulrush, one of the native grasses I had mentioned earlier, butterfly milkweed, black-eyed Susan, bee balm, and wild bergamot. Now I know that looks a little cluttery, so let's take off the, oh wait, and mountain mint, got that one. We'll take off the background. So these are kind of the plants that they're going to be able to see in the rain garden as it matures. So this is an example of another rain garden. When I had mentioned the 5% slope, I'm pretty sure this is more than, well, that area might not be more than 5%, but so this was taken at Grace Mountain Lodge. So the Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District has an annual training at this lodge every year in August. And so one of the things they were doing to teach us is to do hands-on experience at rain gardens. It's great to talk about it, but it's totally different when you're out there and you're actually getting your hands dirty and planting it and getting into the design. So for educational purposes, I was out here just sort of helping out with the project. So that's what it looked like before. That's what it looked like, well, before we came. So they had already gotten, they had already dug everything out and had some equipment in there. And this is what I was talking about when you have, because we had a large group of people who didn't know what the plan was. So they spray painted circles so we would know where to put the plants. And I'll admit, I wasn't actually involved with the physical planting. I was trying to take pictures, mostly for this presentation. I'm not going to take credit for things I don't do. But there's also that the saying you have too many chefs in the kitchen. There was a lot of people that came to this, so.
It doesn't look like it's 10 feet away from the structure.
I was worried about that too, and I asked about that, and I was told that that where the drainage is, like where the overflow is 10 feet away. So I don't know, but that was my thought as well, and I actually asked that.
It looks like the downhill slope is going away.
Yeah.
And
In that picture?
Mhm.
Yeah. That is a, like, you better have shoes with laces on them kind of slope. It is very, very steep there. And maybe that's why they did it, because they knew the water wasn't going to stay there because of how steep that slope was. And in this picture, you can kind of see at the bottom right corner, the gutter. So the gutter is going to take water from the roof, go to where those rocks are, and then you have that filter fabric that holds those rocks in place. I do not know what those plants are and why they're there. That's coming through the filter fabric, but that I didn't know.
it's butterfly weed.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like butterfly weed.
Okay. Good, thank you. I'm hoping that's one of the plants on my list. Oh. I don't know how to make that disappear.
Like there are 2 rows then.
Yeah, so butterfly weed, I asked for a list of the different plants they did, so butterfly weed is definitely one that was on there. But this is just an example of some of the flowers. I'm sorry, I don't have pictures of them all. Now, if you need me to go back to that slide, let me know. Now back in 2015, they had a rain garden at the other area of the lodge. And this is what it looked like. I wasn't involved with this one at all. But this is what it looked like after they had constructed it and put the plants in. And then when I was out helping with the second rain garden, that's what it looked like when it matured. So this is like 7 years. And I really like this because it gives you an idea of how it can mature. And they do periodically have to go through, like we were helping pull out some of the invasive plants that had gotten mixed in. I know they gave us some like inkberry stems so we could plant inkberry in our own homes. Unfortunately, I didn't get to plant it in time, but I tried. And then those are the plants that they have out in there. Okay, maintenance. So some things you have to keep in mind, or you have to do after you do your rain garden, is you want to make sure you water it for the first couple of months. It all depends on the weather. We can't predict the weather. So if you have a lot of rainfall events, probably don't need to water it as much. Well, if it's a drier spell, you will. After a heavy rainfall event for the first 6 months, you have the rain garden. You want to check your gutters. You want to check if you have like a stone path that's leading to your garden. You want to make sure there's no leaves or sedimentation or anything in your garden that's not working as it should. And you want to kind of clean that out or repair it. Unfortunately, one common thing is going to be trash. If you have trash thrown on your road and have a heavy rain event, it'll get into your garden. And that's something you also need to do. Like, it's important to do it every 6 months, but it's also important to do it now and then to make sure your garden's functioning. You want to remove any weeds and invasive plants. I know that could be really tricky to determine, okay, is this the plant I had or is this an invasive? So highly recommend when you're doing your plan, know where you put your plants. So that way you can kind of keep an eye out. Okay, I know I didn't put anything that looked like that there. So that might be a weed. You want to add mulch in the wintertime because you want to make sure you keep that 2 to 3 inches of mulch, and you do that typically around February, March. So now would be a good time. And then that last picture I showed you of the rain garden that matured, they were pruning some of those plants and just kind of making sure everything was clean and neat and not some of the overstory overtaking the understory. So you do have to do a little bit of maintenance to it. Okay, finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about our financial assistance program. So it's called VCAP, and it's the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program. It's an urban cost share program that we have, and it provides financial incentives and technical and educational assistance to property owners for installing best management practices. So there are a lot of best management practices that you can actually get funding for through this program. Right now, I'm gonna talk about rain gardens, but if you want to learn more, certainly talk to me afterwards or shoot me an email and I can give you some more guidance. To be eligible for VCAP, you need to have an erosion or water quality issue. So right now, if you just have grass that you want to take out, so you can put some native plants in, that wouldn't be considered a VCAP project. But if you have a lot of erosion and some drainage issues, that could be a VCAP project. So cost share means that we share the costs. So VCAP will basically cover 80% of your receipts. We'll go through your receipts, and then 80% of that you'll get a check for. And it's up to $7,000. It is a reimbursement program. With that said, they just started a new pilot program where they can fund your project like 50% of the project up front. So that's something I'm learning about. This literally just came out. So that's some other assistance you can get. Pretty much anyone is eligible for VCAP, whether you're a private homeowner. I've done homeowners, I've done HOAs. HOAs can be tricky to work with because people have very strict views. I see some heads nodding of what things should look like. And of course, you know, you're using HOA dues money to install these practices, but it can be done. Schools and areas of worship. Basically, large businesses would probably be one of the few that wouldn't be eligible. So every soil and water district handles the VCAP program differently. When the program first came out, we got a ton of phone calls. We'd go out, we'd do site visits, we'd write these nice plans, we'd give it to them, we're all excited, and then we'd never hear from them. So it took a lot of time and energy and work for people that didn't realize how much was involved on their end. So what we've done is we've done a registration period. So we have an application on our website. You fill the application, you talk about what project you want to do, how much it might cost, you know, just some general estimations. You send it to us, and then we're open until April 30th. And then sometime mid-July or so, we'll contact you and let you know whether or not we think your project is good for VCAP. What I tell everyone is it doesn't hurt to apply. The worst thing we could do is say, no, this isn't eligible for VCAP. Well, guess what? You already did all that work of designing your rain garden and figuring out what plants you wanted. So you could still do that on your own. So it doesn't hurt to apply. Oops. That was just, it was a link to our website and then a link to the official website for VCAP. So you could get an idea of all the different practices that are eligible. Rain gardens and conservation landscaping are the two more popular ones because they require a lot less engineering needed to design those practices. These are just some of the many resources you can look into and things that I had pulled from. So again, I have our website at the bottom and I have VCAP's website. I also do our district's website. So on the VCAP page, I try very hard to keep things organized and make sure everyone has good resources for what they need, because I want to see people succeed. And I want to see these practices go through. So the last couple slides when I wasn't showing pictures of plants, this is one of the reasons why. These are all the pictures that I had gotten from, and just credit to those people who had supplied those pictures, and that it takes a lot of work, but I do want to make sure we recognize everyone who does that. And Nancy Beers was a huge help. She had lots of nice pictures. And now questions.
I do have a question about the drainage calculations. I understand why it's important to, you know, have the right size rain garden to accommodate the drainage that you're going to have. But what's the worst case scenario of having a rain garden that turns out to be too small for the water that's draining? And I ask that because the alternative is no, in my case, the alternative is no rain garden. So is it worse to have a rain garden that's too small than to have no rain garden at all? Or is there a problem with that?
Do you know?
What I've done in some situations is if the rain garden is too small, sometimes you could find other ways to move the water. Use swales. You can use other things that will spread the water over the rest of the yard and over the rest of the garden. If you have lawn around your rain garden, that's a little bit harder. But if you have garden around that, it's easy to do. So I guess that's one solution is putting the swales in is probably and making the rain garden so that it will move the water to the other parts of the garden, as long as you're not putting it in the other person's yard.
Well, so the scenario I have, the scenario right now, I have water that is a slope and it runs into my neighbor's yard. So it'd be nice if I could have a rain garden because that would put less water in their yard. But if it's too small, is there any big problem with that? Or is it's still going to be less water going into the neighbor's yard, right?
I wouldn't see a problem as long as you have someplace for that overflow.
Yeah.
Because you have to keep in mind that if it's too small for what you designed, that overflow has to go somewhere.
And you want to make sure it doesn't erode, there's not,
I
there's not
see,
so
yeah.
much water coming
The
out that
way
it
you
erodes.
structured it, it could, yeah.
And you can also mitigate erosion to some degree with plantings, like if you could put shrubs in between your neighbor's yard and where the runoff is. There are some, depending on the conditions, there are some plants with deep roots, like, lizard's tail that will soak up the water and will also impede the flow because they grow so thick. But, I did a yard that had a big slope like that, and I think that's probably the solution is to try to stop that or slow that runoff with other kind of plantings down the way. And what kind of plantings, you're just gonna have to look at your conditions, if it's shade or sun or what.
What's to stop all the mulch from washing away?
What's what?
What's to stop all the mulch from washing?
Well, the
away?
mulch is at the bottom of your rain garden, so
Yeah, but if
it shouldn't go anywhere.
you said.
It's
put it-
like in a bowl.
To put it on once every year, 3 inches deep, if the berm is only this deep and the water rises up, wouldn't it just all wash over the edge?
It shouldn't.
No.
It should be heavy enough to stay in place.
You know, you guys, it's
But-
If it rains immediately after you put it down, it gets nasty, but
Yeah.
it kind of locks itself in place after that.
They also decay over the years too, so you have to add, you might have to add.
That's why you have to add. It's not because it's washing out, it's because it breaks down.
And you're not gonna add 3 inches every year, it's gonna build it up to where you
Yeah.
have 3 inches.
Yeah, yeah.
but I guess that's the shredded mulch and not the nugget, right?
Right.
Those nuggets float.
No,
all
yeah,
over
you
the
don't want,
place.
yeah, you don't want it to float out.
Right.
Good question. though.
I'm,
Oh, sorry.
you said the VCAP was an urban program. Can you use it if you're more rural?
Yes. So if, basically, when I say it's an urban, it's more urban suburban. It's because like from the agriculture side, we already have a lot of programs, so we didn't want agriculture to tap into this, and we have other programs that are available for them. So yeah, if you're rural. And if you're not from Prince William County, every county has, most of the counties should have something like, should have like the VCAP program. And if they don't have the VCAP program, you might want to talk to your soil and water conservation district for your county and say, hey, I heard about this and I want you guys to get involved. And sometimes it's just a matter of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wondered about, the red columbine in the rain garden. I always thought it needed good drainage, red columbine. But is it growing in the rain garden that you designed?
To the best of my knowledge, it's growing fine.
It depends, I think it depends
Sure.
on what level, you have those 3-step levels. So if it's in one of the higher ones, it's in drier.
One of the things that sometimes is counterintuitive about a rain garden is the bowl will actually be drier than the rest of your garden sometimes, because you're actually putting in good drainage. So if you live in Prince William County that has a lot of clay, if you have a lot of trees like leaf cover in that, you could end up where the supposed like wet part of your garden, which you would think the bowl would be, is going to be drier than the rest of your garden, just because your garden with that clay and everything, it still retains the water because of the clay, unless it's in full sun and it dries up completely, but in shaded environments, so you sort of have to look. The columbine could easily work like where the drainage is, but you're just gonna have to look at your garden and see if the columbine is gonna be right for that place. You'll just have to check the soil around it, check the rest of the garden. Because that's one of the things I found out. It's sort of weird that
Yeah,
the rain garden is drier than the rest of the garden
yeah, I mean,
sometimes.
everything else, every other plant you mentioned has been, a plant that I know that or understand that needs moisture, but that's curious about that one. Okay. Thanks.
When I looked it up, columbine requires moderate soil moisture, but can be drought tolerant.
Thank you for looking that up. What's your,
My community did a VCAP project and it sounded dauntingly horrible when I started first reading it. And ours was erosion and not anything else, but we're on our 4.5 year of overseeing it. And they were so much help. It was ridiculous. And have you been back to see it
I
recently?
have not, I need to.
Yeah, we got some honeysuckle to get out, but it looks good. Yeah, so I mean, it was just flat out bare ground eroding onto a walkway and it was just horrible. And now it's native plants.
Thank you very much.
A question.
Mhm.
I had never heard of a rain garden, that's why I signed up.
Okay.
I actually thought it was something completely different. So is it basically used if your, where the water's running off
Mhm.
is for erosion?
Mhm.
Is that basically what they're used for?
Yeah, erosion, collecting water, again, kind of like slowly getting that water to infiltrate into the groundwater to recharge it.
Okay,
Using water instead of letting it run off down the street.
okay.
It helps with
Is it
flooding and
stormwater
flood
management?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is it viable to have one if, because I have no neighbors, so our water, I don't live in Warren County.
Mhm.
The runoff that we have is, like, I don't think it's something to do where I live.
Well, even if it just moves fast, even if it doesn't bother yours, it doesn't
Yeah.
seep into the
It's
groundwater,
not
so you're not
seeping.
recharging your own groundwater.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why it's valuable, it just slows down the movement of
The
water
movement.
to the-
So basically, it fills up.
Mhm.
And then, so it's almost like perking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if your ground doesn't perk, it even makes sense to try and have one.
Again, it depends on your
I mean, mine
situation.
perks, obviously, because
Okay, good, good.
it's working, you know, and they have septic, but. So that's what they're basically used for, is what I guess my question is.
Kind of like a holding pond,
Okay,
but on a much smaller
and the
scale.
plants don't just float away? That's interesting.
You did it right. Let me get the mulch down.
Yeah, yeah, because on our property, that's why I came to this, is we have an area on our property where after rain it gets wet, but then after a couple, I mean, it gets, you know, you don't wanna walk in it, because
Mhm.
it's holding water, and I was thinking, oh, that'd be great for a rain garden, because it stays wet there, but this is something completely different.
And-
It's to help with erosion and.
You should go to the workshop on vernal pools, that's what.
Fascinating, so thank you very much.
Go. And I mean, even if you have like a wet area, a rain garden may not be suitable, but like, conservation landscaping might be good, and you just put in native plants that are water loving, and that will kind of help you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a little difficult, being out in the country, you can have, deer eating your garden up.
Oh,
I
we
tried
have-
planting and it
Spray.
was mowed.
I spray our fence, we have 4-board fence, and I spray fence and then drive dogs, and we haven't had a lot of problems, but a lot of my neighbors have, because they just don't take that time and effort to try and train the wildlife to stay with my flower.
What do you
beds.
spraying?
No deer, no, you know.
That works.
Oh, it looks like a champ.
That's worked for us.
We're down with everyone's fine. Well,
Sometimes you have to change onions too, that
Yeah.
used to it.
yeah, you're basically
Yes.
training them. It works really well. You have to keep on, you know, you have to reapply it, but I don't put it, you can put it on your plants, but I don't like to, so I just do like rocks and fence posts and things like that. And it's been kind of a miracle worker.
Probably works better because your neighbors aren't.
That's right. Go tell your neighbors.
Never got a lot of costs.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions online?
We surprisingly do not.
Okay.
But I had a similar question. You know, there's an area in our garden on campus where the water, it just comes down the hill, it sits right there. There's
Yeah.
nowhere for us to off put it. And I was like, oh, bring our big birthday, right? Because it absorbs the water. But what do you recommend then? I guess you said just planting water loving plants, but you don't have a rain garden technically.
Yeah, possibly. I would do the infiltration test first, because if it passes the infiltration test, you can do a rain garden. If it's really wet, there's other practices that I didn't get into, like installing a dry well. Which basically will temporarily hold all that water and then let that slowly recharge the groundwater. We haven't done any of those yet, but I mean, there's definitely other options.
We try wetland plants too,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because the rain garden, like, they're not wetland plants. They don't live in water, but in a situation like yours, you might be able to, depending on how long the water stays there,
Right,
and even if the water drains, if it's still soggy,
right.
you try making it into a wetland, it's almost like a drainage, it becomes almost like a drainage ditch at that point.
But for both of these situations, couldn't you also put a rain garden upslope from the wet part
You can.
to capture the water?
Slow it down.
And also like on large slopes, sometimes anything you can do to interrupt the water flow, again, plantings, you may want to put in, I forget what they call them now. But the crosswise ditches that we do down, not swales. Water bars or something like that.
I know we have vegetated stormwater conveyance
Yeah.
channels, it's like, you know what you're talking about, like they have like little
Yeah.
blocks to kind of stepping steps.
Yeah, so that could catch it and also move the water. Just to keep the water from flowing down in one place, just to move it out in other parts where it could be absorbed. But the main problem is all that water is coming off the gutters, this wide,
Concentrated.
boom.
Yep. That's right.
I know our native amphibians are really struggling with vernal pools, the loss of woodland wetland habitats.
Mhm.
Is there a way we could work with things like this to actually keep that water in place to create a vernal pool for some of these animals? Right, well, workshop.
Well, that's another workshop.
I'm honestly not too sure on that one.
Thank you so much about rain gardens, which is great, it's wonderful, but I'm just curious about, creating vernal pools or at least protecting the ones that are naturally showing up.
I take the, bird baths, just put them around. Garden flower beds, so then when the rain comes. I mean, you're actually
man.
watering.
Yeah.
Good point, thank you. You had a really good point here about that.
Well,
I'm saying, Anthony just said to us.
Oh, I just said, she's asking about the water quality, and the question probably comes down to the quality of the water of the runoff. So if you have the impervious surface, it's gonna be picking up all those contaminants, you don't know what's in it. So if it's, green space on your backyard that doesn't have any impurities and it's just rainwater, it's probably better than if it's, the bottom of your neighborhood, there's like cars on there. Small roofing. They don't want to have that. Does your camera have?
I know there are a lot of good resources on vernal pools, and there are even workshops on them. I don't know if the county does any, but I think the Conservation Alliance may, so it's best to look at that, because vernal pools are tricky. It's like, not just the water quality, but even the way they get their water is different. A lot of it's groundwater, and it's not necessarily on runoff, so it's best to do that.
Okay, thank you. To add on to that, the Clifton Institute out in Warrenton has a vernal pool workshop coming up. I think it might be next week or in 2 weeks. So you can check real fast. Yeah, they have a workshop coming up, and yes, on the vernal pools, it's not just standing water. The water has to be there at a certain time of the season. It has to be of a certain quality. It has to be there for a certain length of time. And salamanders are kind of endemic to that pool. So if they were born in that pool, they will always come back to that pool every single year. So it's a totally different ecosystem than trying to build a rain garden where you're addressing it from a stormwater concept, and stormwater coming off of a roof or an impervious surface or a point source versus creating a natural ecosystem.
And I live I'm near JP Black Oak.
Yeah.
And so, but you can tell where they've all been destroyed by the housing developments.
Yeah.
And so there's little places.
Where so I like your concept there of thinking of what is left, how can we protect what has been destroyed for that area. And encouraging people to, not fill those little holes there.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna.
Yeah, try to-
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
I have one more slide. This is just me being silly, because everybody likes to take pictures. So that's my son, the first time he took a handful of dirt and put it in his mouth and realized that was not a good idea.
It seemed like a good idea.
So just this past Sunday, he came running up and he had dirt all around his lips, so that still hasn't stopped him from trying to do this. I'm fine. You want the kids to be outdoors. You don't want them afraid.
Get them a tan butterfly.
Thank you.
Welcome, thank you. Seen our soil and water district directory, somebody accidentally tagged it while picking up things, and if you happen to find that in your pile and you put it back on our table, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I don't leave this here, so. And it will. And so we need to go back. Oh, yeah.
You can just don't understand that.
They talked about other plans. There's similar situations. Swales. The other side of it all comes down like that. We know exactly where. Yeah. And now it's important to. And where the sun goes way west.
It's from one of the names. Yeah, stepping. So I mean, that is one of the most.
Oh, yeah, it's always environment. I can just walk into the.